Down there, life continues. The traffic is awful, stocks go on trading, and Star Trek is still showing.
Good day to you, grade 8 learners. Welcome to today's Natural Sciences lesson brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. My name is Ndabezinhle Dliwayo, and I hope I find you well. Today's topic, we want to look at the conservation of ecosystems. I believe we're not meeting this word for the first time, the word conservation. This is the center of our lesson today. So we're saying everyone has a role in the conservation of an ecosystem, as we shall see. So you realize from our previous lessons, we've been putting so much focus on ecosystems. We've been learning a lot about ecosystems, the energy flow in ecosystems, and we're saying energy is necessary for life to continue. And therefore, we're saying it is important that we conserve our ecosystems. Right, so I hope you are ready for our lesson for today, and let us begin our lesson. So I was saying at the end of the lesson, you should be able to define conservation. What do we mean by conservation? And then also you should be able to describe what a conservationist does. Maybe by the end of the lesson, you may actually think of changing your career choice and become what we call a conservationist. So we want to know what a conservationist does. And then we also have to be able to explain how a conservationist manages and conserves ecosystem. So it's all about management and conservation of our ecosystems. And then also we want to be able to explain why we need to help with the conservation of ecosystems. I'll circle that word there. Why we need. So it is everyone who has the responsibility to conserve ecosystem. So it's me, it is you, it is the person next to you, it is your grandmother, it is everybody's responsibility to help in the conservation of our ecosystem. So we will explain why we have that important role, and then we will list ways in which I'll circle it again, we can help to conserve our ecosystem. So we're going to list those ways, and by the end of the lesson, if you are not doing some of those ways, ensure that you practice those methods in your day-to-day life so that you are able to help conserve our ecosystems. And then I believe you have met these terms: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So we're going to explain what these terms mean: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Right, so those are our objectives for our lesson. And then we're saying for our pre-knowledge, we're still building on the concept of our ecosystem. So for you to be able to know how to conserve an ecosystem, you should know what an ecosystem is. I believe you now know what an ecosystem is. You know the different types of ecosystems. You know what the ecosystems provide for all the species that live in the environment. Remember the feeding relationships in our ecosystems. We're talking of, remember, we have our producers, that is our first trophic level, with the important role of trapping light energy from the sun and therefore producing the food that is going to be consumed by our primary consumers, which is the second trophic level. We go to the third trophic level where we have our secondary consumers, and then our tertiary consumers. I hope you still remember those feeding relationships. And then remember the concept on adaptation. We're saying the environment around us is changing. And we're saying as the environment changes, animals and other living organisms have to develop strategies for them to survive. Do you still remember the survival strategies that we spoke of in our previous lessons? Okay, and also remember the types of our adaptation: structural, behavioral, and functional. I hope you still remember all those types of adaptation. And we're saying adaptation is essential for survival. As our ecosystems change, organisms need to adapt. If an organism fails to adapt, the organism becomes extinct. Right. I hope you still remember all those concepts. You've learned about these concepts all the way from your grade 5, and even our previous lessons on ecosystems, we touched on these concepts. Right. Now, as usual, let us begin our lesson with a small warm-up exercise. And I believe you are now eager for our warm-up exercise. And take a look at our warm-up for today. This is our baseline assessment, right? This is based on what we covered in our previous lesson. And for this baseline, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Right, welcome back. I hope you have successfully attempted our questions. Remember, you can join us on our WhatsApp platform 079 578 2908. So, for such questions, you can post your solutions. We need to see them. If you're having challenges, also communicate with us so that we may assist you. Right, so now let us look at the questions together. Maybe before we look at the questions, just a point of emphasis. Remember the number there, that is just a WhatsApp platform, WhatsApp only. Please do not call. So just send your WhatsApp messages. Right, we are looking at the Gemsbok there. Right, we're saying this striking antelope from the Kalahari Desert. Already you know something about the Kalahari Desert, what kind of ecosystem we're dealing with. It prefers grass and shrubs, but will dig for roots and tubers if it needs water. They save water by not sweating and sleep in the shade during the day. If they cannot find shade, they turn the body's lightest side to the sun. So this is what we are told there in the paragraph about the Gemsbok. So let's answer the first question. How is the species adapted to life, okay, in its habitat there? This is a desert ecosystem. So how is it adapted? Number one, let's look at its body. Okay, you will realize that its body color there, look at the body color of the Gemsbok. Look at the sand there, the soil. What can you say? You can see that its body color ensures that your Gemsbok is able to blend in with its environment. Okay, and that is an adaptation strategy that can ensure its survival. It can easily hide from predation. When the predator is at a distance, it cannot easily distinguish it from its environment. So it can easily blend in. So that is one way. And the other thing, think of the lighter side that is mentioned there. It turns its lighter side, the lightest side, to the sun. So in the event that it does not find any shade anywhere, it will turn its lighter side to the sun. And we know that light objects, they are good reflectors of heat. The desert is very hot, so it will reflect the heat, and therefore it ensures its survival. Okay, so another thing that we note there, it is able to extract water from roots and tubers. In the desert, we know there is shortage of water. So if it eats roots and tubers, it is able to actually survive those dry conditions in the desert. I hope you were able to pick those points. Okay, the next part, what types of adaptation are these? Okay, number one, which adaptation did you note there? We have behavioral adaptation. Where did we see the behavior there? It sleeps in the shade during the day. Okay, that is a behavioral adaptation. And the fact that it turns its lightest side towards the sun, that is also a behavior that it has developed for it to be able to resist the hot temperatures of the desert. So we've noted the behavioral adaptation. What else? We have functional adaptation. Remember, this has to do with the biological processes that can happen in its body. When it eats roots and tubers, it is able to actually extract the water that it needs from the roots and the tubers. And we're saying that is a functional adaptation. And also in line with that, remember, a functional adaptation can also cover that part where we are saying it does not sweat. Okay, remember, it does not sweat so that it can save water. And that has to do with its body system, its biological system, how its body functions. Okay, last but not least, we have the structural adaptation. Okay, and we're saying its structural adaptation is just to do with its body covering. Remember, we said its body covering, it is able to match or to blend in there with its environment. I hope you still remember these sections. We had an interesting segment there on adaptations in our previous lessons. All right, now let us proceed to our business for today. We want to talk about conservation of an ecosystem. And from the onset, I'd like to emphasize, remember, we're saying everyone has a role to play in this aspect on conservation of our ecosystem. So we want to start by defining the first term there, that is conservation. We're saying this is the sustainable use of the ecosystem resources or natural resources. Sustainable use of our resources. Okay, and then what do we mean by the term sustainable? Okay, when we're talking of sustainable, we're saying we're keeping an ecological balance, okay, by not using up our resources. We'll talk more about this. How can we achieve it in our lesson today? Right, the next term, we talk of biodiversity. And remember, we're saying the term, whenever you see the term means bio means life, okay? And diversity, we're talking about a variety, different kinds of living organisms. So biodiversity is the total variety of species in an area, okay? So we'll talk more of that in our lesson today. And then we talk of alien species. Alien species. I know some of us, when we see the word alien, we are busy thinking of our movies, our sci-fi movies. We're not talking about those aliens coming from space. But when we're saying alien species, these are species that are not indigenous, okay, to a specific area. They are not originating from that local area. For example, these can be species that are coming from other countries, okay? It can be plants, then they are brought into this local land. So those are what we call alien species, right? So these are the terms that we will meet. We'll talk more about them in our lesson. Okay, and take a closer look at our image there. We have a hand holding our environment, and we're saying it is every one of us. Yes, even you yourself, you have a role in the conservation of our environment. Right, now let us proceed then. So we're saying a resource is sustainable. Take note of this word today. A resource is sustainable if it is used in a way that does not destroy it. Okay, so think of the trees, all the other resources that you can think of. As long as you use them in a way that do not destroy them, we're saying the resource becomes sustainable. Okay, so this involves the careful use and protection. So take note, careful use, it does not mean we're not supposed to use these resources, but we have to use them carefully. And then also we need to protect them. Okay, and we're saying that process is called our conservation. The careful use and the protection of our resources, that is our conservation. So it is important that we conserve all these living things so that we can maintain our biodiversity. Remember what we said biodiversity means. It is the variety of life, the variety of all these living things. We need our giraffes, we need our elephants, we need our trees. All these things, we need them. Okay, so it is important that we protect them. Okay, and we use them carefully. Right. So whose role is it? Remember I said it is everyone's role to conserve these resources. However, there is special people whom we said actually they are trained, okay, to conserve and to manage these ecosystems, and we call them our conservationists. You can see here there she's smiling, she's carrying a pangolin, one of the endangered species. So we're saying our conservationists, they are trained actually to conserve and also to protect our ecosystems. And as I said, today you may think of changing that career choice that you had, and maybe you may want to be a conservationist. Okay, right, let us proceed there. So the question is, what does managing ecosystems involve? Okay, take down these points. Managing our ecosystems, it can involve, number one, the control of invasive plants. The control of invasive plants. Can you take down that point? Right. This word invasive, it is coming from the word to invade. I hope you know what it means to invade. Okay. The invasive plants are what we call our alien plants, which are brought into our local ecosystems, okay, coming from other countries. All right. And when they come there, we say that they are invasive in the sense that they invade or they colonize the whole system or our ecosystem. Okay. And in the process, it means our indigenous plants, no, they actually fail to grow because of the invasion of these alien plants. Right? We have typical examples, what we call the Australian black wattle tree. Already by the name there, Australian, you can tell it's coming from Australia. So it is not our local or our indigenous trees. Okay. And then we've got the pine trees. Okay. So we're saying if you want to manage our ecosystem, we need to control these invasive plants. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why is it that we need to control them. Right. Number two, management of ecosystems, it involves the preservation of wetlands. In the image there, we have a typical wetland. Okay, we'll talk more about them in our lesson today. Our wetlands, they have specific roles. They are important to us, to the whole ecosystem. Okay, and we're saying our wetlands are just waterlogged areas that are home to many plants, to birds and other animals. As you can see there, we've got animals and some other birds there. Okay, so these wetlands, they provide habitats for different kinds of animal species, as well as playing other roles. And we're saying it is important that we preserve them. And we'll talk more on how to do that in our lesson today. So far, two key points. How do we manage our ecosystem? Number one, control invasive plants. Number two, preserve wetlands. But let's talk more about these points, right? Just one important point there, which we almost missed there. Remember, a typical example that we have is called the St. Lucia wetland. Maybe some of you have once visited there. Okay, people go there on vacation and other things just to go and relax. Right, it's a typical example of our wetland. Right, so let's talk more about these processes. Right, the control of our invasive plants. Right, we can see there is a man who's carrying some gear there and wearing a mask, and he's busy spraying some alien plants. Okay, why do we need to control these invasive plants? Okay, we're saying they invade the space of the indigenous plants. Okay, and in the process, we're saying, what do? These invasive plants, they tend to absorb more water. Okay, they absorb more water than the indigenous what? Plants. And take note, we're saying if we take a plant from Australia, there's some pests that attack it from its local environment. And then you bring it here, you're going to realize that the pests that attack the plant, they cannot survive here. Let's say they cannot survive here in South Africa. Therefore, it means that plant is not going to have natural enemies. And therefore, it is going to multiply. You see, you multiply. And therefore, it means the indigenous plants will not have space for them to grow and develop. Right? Hence the term invasive. I hope you're taking note of that. Therefore, we're saying, since they draw too much water for our indigenous plants, we need to control these plants. Okay? And here we're just explaining our term indigenous. Because someone will be saying, say, you're busy saying indigenous. I don't know what indigenous means. Right? We're saying indigenous plants. These are the plants that have always existed, okay, in an ecosystem. Right? So they are just the local plants that are there from your area from 19 all along. Right. So we need to control these invasive plants. Okay, we can proceed there. So how can we control them? Right, we can use what we call a biological control methods. Okay, where we're saying in biological control, remember I said the moment you see the word bio, know that it means life. So in biological control, we're using living things, okay, to control the population of our species there. Right, so we'll introduce it there, and it is going to actually control our alien plant. Okay, and then we have chemical control. Remember the image that we had there, the man was spraying those plants. So in chemical control, we use poisons now. Okay, we spray those plants and then they die. Okay, but take note, the use of chemicals is actually expensive. Therefore, it tends to be a disadvantage. And we're saying the spraying of those alien plants also needs to be repeated every year, right? So that tends to be a disadvantage. And remember, we're using chemical poisons, toxins, and we're saying these can become a harm to the environment when they enter into the ecosystem and can damage the other living organisms of our ecosystem. So we have our biological control, we have our chemical control. How else we can use mechanical control, right? And what do we mean by mechanical control? Don't think of the mechanic there who fixes your car at home. When we're talking of mechanical control, we are referring to things like cutting down manually. You're cutting down the trees, okay, and you burn them, or you uproot those alien plants. Okay, that is one way you can eliminate them. Okay, and we're saying this is also time consuming because it needs to be repeated every year, because when the seeds of those plants fall, they're going to germinate again, and therefore you need to continue repeating the process every year as the seeds germinate. So these are the methods that you can use to control your alien plants. Okay, so for today, we're saying when you watch those alien movies, when you see the word alien, remember the alien plants. We're saying these are not local plants, they are brought from other countries. All right, we can proceed then. The next point, we spoke of wetlands. Okay, we said control of our alien plants and preservation of wetlands. Right, and then we're saying what are wetlands? Typical examples of wetlands are marshes. You can see there from our image there, that is a typical marsh. And then what do we call that? Another typical example of our wetland, we call these flood plains. Okay, even our lakes, they're typical examples of our wetlands. And then last but not least, we can have the estuarine systems. Okay, so these are typical examples of our wetlands. And we're saying, for us to manage our ecosystems, it is important that we preserve these wetlands, right? So looking at our wetlands, we're saying the wetlands are important, okay? How are they important? What is the role that they play, these wetlands? Remember, we have a typical example there from that image. That is a typical example of our wetland, right? We're saying, why are they important? Why do we need to preserve them? Number one, they are a home or a habitat to a variety of water-loving plants and animals. So they're giving these plants what? A habitat. And therefore, if it is offering a habitat, it means also it is offering them the breeding grounds. So these plants, these animals can also breed, can multiply, and ensure that we have our species diversity. We ensure that there is continuity, continuous survival, the habitat, and therefore for what? For breeding processes, purposes. Right. And also these wetlands, I believe you have seen them when you move around your communities. You have seen some areas that are always waterlogged. Okay, and we're saying those wetlands, they act like sponges. You know a sponge, right? Okay, they hold water. So when they hold water, what do? They help us to prevent flooding. Okay, so these wetlands, they are very, very important. And hence we're saying it is important that we preserve them. Right. I hope that is making sense. And also, when you look at these wetlands, you are saying they are natural filters. Okay, they help us to clean our water. Okay, it removes all the poisonous chemicals that may be there in the environment. So these wetlands, they are very, very important, and it is important that we actually preserve them. Right, so at this point, I'm just going to give you a minute for you to take down these points. 1 minute. Right, welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you've managed to copy down those points. At this moment, I believe we have realized the two main things that we are important when it comes to the conservation or the management of our ecosystems. Right, we're saying the control of our alien plants. Remember the biological control, the chemical control, and so on. And then now we're saying, secondly, we're talking of the preservation of these wetlands. And some of us, we've visited these places not knowing that these are actually wetlands, okay, where we can actually go there for recreation, for fishing, and other activities, okay. And we're saying, even our grandmothers, sometimes there at our homes, what do they use? If you go to these wetlands, you find reeds. You see the reeds. What do our grandmothers use the reeds for? They use them for thatching or even for making baskets. I believe we have seen that. So you can see that it is important that we preserve these wetlands. Right. Now, at this stage, I'm going to give you a small activity, okay? A small activity on what we have covered up until this point, right? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes for you to work on these questions. 5 minutes. Right. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm sure you were able to attempt those questions correctly. Now remember, I said our WhatsApp number 079 578 2908. We're interested very much in your solutions. Can you post them there? And if you're having challenges, feel free there to ask questions. Right. So our first question there says, what is conservation? And we're saying conservation is protecting our natural resources for our future generations. So that is our conservation there. And then we're saying, what is an alien plant? Remember, this is a plant that does not grow naturally in a particular ecosystem. Okay, and we're saying it comes from other countries, right? Those are typical alien plants. And then we're saying, what is the function of a wetland? We mentioned a number of functions. Okay, you can mention amongst others. We said, remember, we said this acts like a sponge to hold water, and therefore it helps us to control flooding, and also they act as filters to clean the water of toxic materials. Amongst other functions, remember we said that these, they actually offer habitats for different plants and animals, and therefore they're able to breed, okay, to ensure the continuity of a particular species. So you can mention as many there, as many as possible. Then, why must the alien plants be controlled? Why must they be controlled? Remember we say these alien plants, they absorb a lot of water, okay, such that now the indigenous plants, they are now deprived of the water. They invade the space of the indigenous plants, and therefore they spread quickly. And remember, one of the main reasons that they spread quickly is because that they do not have natural enemies. Okay, so they don't have the pests that attack them in that particular ecosystem. Right, this is what we have learned so far until this point, and I hope it is making sense. We know what wetlands are, we need to preserve them. If you know them around your areas, around your communities, there's some activities that all of us can do so that we actually preserve them. Right, let us proceed with our lesson. Now we want to look at the ways to conserve ecosystems. And remember, we said we have to conserve our ecosystem. So this is a challenge to you and me. So if possible, take down these lists, these ways, and if possible, can you execute them? Right. So the ways include, number one, saving water. Think of different ways you can save water. Just closing the tap, just closing the tap at home. Okay, it helps you to save water. When do you close the tap? You close the tap when you're brushing your teeth. Some, they leave the tap running when you're brushing your teeth. Or even when your father is shaving, tell him, Daddy, can you close that tap? Okay, fix the leaking taps. So there are many ways you can conserve your water. So I want you to think around that point. How can I save the water in my community? And also you take action there. Number two, recycling, reusing, and reducing. If you take note, all the beverages that you buy these days, you'll see signs that are written recycling, reusing, reducing. What do they mean? What do they mean? For example, when you're talking about recycling, you've always seen people in the streets pulling those big trucks going to recycle the waste. Okay, so we're saying all those plastics, all the cans, the bottles that we have used, you can collect them so that they can be recycled. Okay, and then we're talking about reusing. For example, if you want to reuse, we're saying you are using an item more than once. For example, if you buy a bottled water, you can take the same container, fill it up with water, and put it in the fridge. That is one method of reusing. You're using an item more than once. Okay, or you can take it and use it for other purposes in the house instead of littering the environment. And we're talking about reducing. When we're talking about reducing, what comes to your mind? When we're saying reduce something, we mean minimize. Minimize the amount of waste. Minimize the amount of waste that you dump. Okay. So instead of dumping everything, some can be organic waste. You can put it in the garden. Okay. So as to minimize the waste that you dump. Okay. So as we're going over these methods, I want you to sit down and think of ways you can do these things as an individual, as a family, and even as your community. Right, let us proceed there. When we are talking of safely disposing human waste and household waste. Okay, so I believe that one is straightforward. Number 4, reducing energy consumption, the use of electric power. We're always talking about load shedding, load shedding, load shedding. How can you reduce energy consumption? Right, we'll talk more about that point as the lesson progresses. So also think of various ways on how you can reduce this energy consumption. And last but not least, we talk about planting trees. Right, so you can easily plant a tree. Okay, you can easily plant a tree. And we're saying, what is the importance of planting trees? Do you know that the trees actually play a role in reducing noise? They help they help us to eradicate noise pollution. Do you know that? The trees, they help us to reduce global warming. Okay, and we're saying the trees, they also help us to conserve our soils. Okay, we're saying the trees also help us to reduce water pollution. I hope you can see how important it is for us to plant trees. So these are the 5 major points that highlight us different ways we can actually conserve our ecosystems. Please take note of them. And as I said, it is the duty of every one of us to practice this. Okay, I hope this is making sense. Right. Otherwise, that being said, just a small task there on what we've just been talking about. For this task, I'm just going to give you 2 minutes. 2 minutes starting from now. Right. Welcome back. Welcome back. Let us deal with the questions. We're saying state one way in which we can conserve ecosystems. Remember, we listed 5 ways there on how we can conserve our ecosystem. But of interest to us This is the chief one, which I want us to practice starting from now. Reduce, reuse, recycle. And remember, we mentioned the other four, so you can mention all those methods. And then we're saying, how does planting trees help to conserve our ecosystem? This is very important. You can easily plant a tree, isn't it? So that is your task. Make sure that you plant a tree this year. Right? We're saying the trees reduce or they use greenhouse gases. Okay, these are gases that contribute to our global warming, like our carbon dioxide, which they use during photosynthesis. So you see how important trees are. Remember, we said they also reduce noise pollution, they actually reduce water pollution, amongst other functions there. Right. So let us proceed with our lesson today. We're saying in conserving our ecosystems, it is important that we also protect these ecosystems. Okay? So when we protect ecosystems, we protect the habitats where these animals live, where these elephants live. For example, think of the Transfrontier Park or the Kruger National Park there. We're saying in these parks, the animals that live there, they are protected. They are put inside secure boundaries so that we can easily manage them. All right. We're saying once this habitat is protected, it is easy now. The conservationists, they will work in those areas and it is easy for them to manage the populations of the plants and the animals. And then we say they stay healthy. All right. I hope that is making sense. Right. So we're saying when these animals are being protected, we set aside large areas. Look at that beautiful garden. Right. Okay. So these areas now they ensure that we have a huge species diversity. The areas will be rich in biodiversity because these areas are actually protected. And we're saying our typical example there is the Transfrontier Park, which is about 3.6 million hectares, okay, of rich species diversity, okay, and therefore it is easy to manage those areas that are protected, okay. So how do we protect these areas? We protect them through legislation. We have seen that at the course, right? So we protect them by putting laws, okay? And these laws will deal with people such as poachers, okay? And people who just collect plants and clearing land. So we monitor the clearing of land, okay? We monitor all these people who try to poach, and we're saying those areas are protected and there will be laws against such activities, right? Remember we said every person can contribute, can be involved in our conservation process. Collect materials such as plastic, such as paper, okay, for recycling. Okay, you can do that in your schools, at home, separate the different plastic containers, bottles, and so on, and you take them for recycling. And we're saying even our municipalities, they can be involved also in these recycling activities. Right. And then remember, importantly again, the organic waste, the waste that can actually decompose, collect it, make a compost at home, build your beautiful garden. Okay. So dispose of your waste properly. Organic, use it for compost, and you do your vegetable garden. Right. And remember, we talked about saving our energy consumption, reducing our energy consumption. Okay, we're having too much load shedding. So what can you do? Turn off unused light switches. I believe that is easy. You can do that. It is achievable. Okay, switch to energy efficient light bulbs, the LED bulbs. They use less energy. Okay, so you can advise them at home to use these energy efficient bulbs and apply task lighting. What that simply means is use enough light as necessary. If I'm studying, I use my lamp for studying. Why should you keep the light in the bathroom on when you're busy studying there at the lounge? Okay, so use task lighting. Use lighting for a specific purpose so that we reduce energy consumption, and you may realize that even load shedding might reduce. So this is a very, very important one, so that you can even save on your electricity bill at home. All right. So these are the things that you can actually do. But of major importance: reduce, reuse, and recycle. You can see somebody is actually reusing that container and is planting something there. So think of different ways that you can do to reduce, to reuse, and recycle. And we're saying that will make our earth a happier place. Right. Now, what else can you do? Be a responsible consumer. Okay, be a responsible consumer. That is what you can do. Think about what you're doing. How will it affect the environment? Think about what you buy, the food you eat. Okay, before you just do anything, think about it. Okay, before you throw that piece of paper on the ground. Okay, be responsible in everything that you do. Make better choices. Right. So we're saying each and every one of us has that responsible. Okay. So we need to use our resources in a manner that they cannot be depleted. Okay. When you do your fishing, fish the number of fishes that are enough for your consumption. Don't take more than enough. If it is too much, return the fish to the water. Take what is enough. Okay. Reduce your consumption. And then when you're collecting bugs, some they collect bugs for herbal purposes. You have a stomach ache, and my grandmother is saying, I know a tree that can cure you. Take enough for curing, okay, so that the plant can actually grow again. Okay, fish what is enough. Don't take more than what is enough, so that our ecosystem can regrow and provide resources for us the following year. Right. Last activity for our day today. Our lesson is about to conclude. I hope it is making sense. Right. For this activity, I'm just going to give you 3 minutes. Right. Welcome back. Welcome back. So the first question there is saying, what do you think will happen if the natural resource are not used in a sustainable way? What do you think will happen? We're saying your ecosystem will become unbalanced. Okay. So when the ecosystem becomes unbalanced, it means things will run out. Imagine there'll be shortage of food, okay? And some of the living organisms will become extinct. I want you to think more on this point and you see why it is important for you to participate in the conservation of an ecosystem. Think more about this question further on today. So in which way can individuals contribute to the conservation of an ecosystem? How can you contribute? Number one, save water. Remember, take shorter baths. That's one of the easiest things. Don't open the shower the whole day. Just shorter baths, okay? You can save water that way. Reduce energy consumption. Remember the ways that we mentioned there on reducing energy consumption. And be a responsible consumer. Think about what you buy. Think about what you eat. Don't just buy and eat, okay? Be a responsible consumer and practice the 3 R's. What is our 3 R's? Reduce, reuse, and recycle. Okay, those are our 3 R's. Right, we've come to the conclusion of our lesson for today. Remember, we spoke about conservation, which we said it is the sustainable use of the ecosystem's resources. And we said a conservationist is a person who is trained now to conserve and manage an ecosystem. And I hope I've been able to convince you to become a conservationist, even if it is not as a career choice, but it has to be your lifestyle, right? And then what else? The ways of conserving our ecosystem. Number one, save water. Number two, recycle, reuse, and reduce. Safely dispose your human waste. Tell your sister not to just throw nappies anywhere in the street. Dispose waste properly, even the household waste. Reduce energy consumption. And lastly, let us plant our trees. Right. This marks the end of our lesson today. I hope you found the lesson quite informative. Till we meet again, may God bless you.